Well, welcome to the Daily Reflections podcast, and today we continue our series, Rome Lives On, and how the Roman Empire shaped the modern world. In this fifth podcast, we explore the Roman voice in our daily lives, and from the languages we speak to the books that we read, from the schools that we attend, and the calendars we follow. The legacy of Rome is all around us. We look at the Latin and its descendants, Roman literature, education system, and even how Rome shaped the way that we measure time. And we discover that even when speaking English, we use Roman logistic influence every day. The language that conquered the world, the Roman Empire, spread not only its armies and laws, but also its language. Latin became the language of government, education, literature, and commerce throughout much of Europe. And even after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Latin remained the language of scholars, scientists, and of the church for centuries. Over time, Latin evolved into what we now call the Romance language. These include Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, and Romanian, and hundreds of millions of people speak these languages today, all descendants of the language that once spoken in ancient Rome. And even English, which developed from the Germanic roots, contains thousands of words derived from Latin. And this means that every day, often without even realizing it, we are speaking inherited words inherited from Rome. And language is one of humanity's greatest gifts, and God Himself created communication in Genesis 1 because God spoke the universe into existence. Words matter because they reflect the image of our Creator. So Proverbs 18:20 reminds us that death and life are in the power of the tongue. And the Romans used language to build an empire, but God calls us to use language to build one another up. Roman literature and ideas, Rome also gave the world remarkable literature. Writers such as Virgil, Ovid, Seneca, and Cicero produced works that influenced generations of thinkers. Their writings shaped philosophy, ethics, rhetoric, and storytelling. And many of the literal forms that we enjoy today trace their roots back to Rome. Things like poetry, speeches, biographies, histories, and essays. Roman writers believed education and wisdom were essential to the flourishing society. Their influence extended into the Renaissance and beyond. And as Christians, we recognize that wisdom itself comes from God because Proverbs 2:6 says, "For the Lord gives wisdom, from His mouth came knowledge and understanding." See, human knowledge is valuable, but true wisdom begins with God. The Apostle Paul, who lived during the Roman Empire, was highly educated and often used the knowledge and language skills to explain the gospel. Education and learning became powerful tools when placed in God's hands. And Roman influence on education, the Roman valued education. Children learned reading, writing, mathematics, history, and rhetoric. The art of effectively speaking was especially important because leaders needed to communicate clearly and persuasively. And many of the subjects taught in Roman schools became the foundations for educational systems throughout Europe and eventually much of the world. Even today, schools and universities reflect those Roman ideas about structured learning and intellectual development. Education opens doors, but knowledge alone is not enough because Scripture teaches us that knowledge must be joined with wisdom and humility. Proverbs 9:10, we read this. It says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." True education should not simply fill our minds, it should shape our character. And God desires transformed hearts as much as informed minds. Even the calendar, the timekeeping, perhaps one of Rome's most overlooked contributions, is that calendar. Julius Caesar introduced the Julian calendar in 45 BC. It brought greater accuracy, consistency, and measurement of time. Centuries later, refinements produced the Gregorian calendar that much of the world uses today. And even the names of several months reflect Roman history. January comes from Janus, the Roman god of beginnings. March was named after Mars. July honours Julius Caesar, and August honours Emperor Augustus. And the Romans helped organise time itself. But Scripture reminds us that time belongs ultimately to God. Psalm 90:12 says, "Teach us the number of our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." See, life is precious. Every day is a gift. The Romans sought to organise time, but God calls us to use our time wisely. Latin words we use every day. And here are just a few English words that come from Latin. Animal, from anima, meaning life or breath. Video, from videre, meaning I see. Audio, from audia, meaning I hear. And manual, from manus, meaning hand. Agenda means things to be done. Exit comes from the Latin word meaning he goes out, and radius means ray or spoke. Memory comes from a memoria, and even the word scripture comes from the Latin word scripteria, meaning writings. And it's amazing to realise that Romans' voice still echoes in the words that we speak every day. So what can Christians learn from this? Romans' influence reminds us that ideas can outlive empires. Buildings crumble, armies disappear, and political systems change. But words, education, and culture can shape generations. As followers of Christ, we are called to leave a legacy that points people towards eternal truth. Jesus said in Matthew 24:35 that heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. See, Rome's words have endured for centuries, but Christ's words endure forever. So as we conclude today's podcast, consider this. What words are you leaving behind? What kind of influence are you having on those around you? And will your legacy point people towards wisdom, truth, and Christ? So today's key takeaway is simple. Even when speaking English, we use Roman linguistics, influencing every day. The language, education, and culture shaped by Rome continues to affect billions of people, reminding us that ideas and words often outlast empires themselves. So thank you for joining me on Daily Reflections podcast. And if you've enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe and share it with others. By subscribing and liking and sharing, you will help us to continuously spread biblical encouragement, faith, history, and thoughtful reflection to listeners around the world. So until next time, remember the words of Colossians 3:16. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another with all wisdom. So God bless you, and thank you for listening to today's podcast.